In the Gospel of John, Jesus makes 7 I am statements. Jesus says, I am the bread of life, the light of the world, the door, the good shepherd, the resurrection and the life, the way, the truth, and the life. This is the last of Jesus' I am sayings. I am the true vine. So if you can turn with me to John chapter 15. I'm reading from the English Standard Version if it's a bit different. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers. And the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. I'm going to go all the way to 17. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has none than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another. Can I get the pictures? Oh, okay. So I learn best when I can see something and experience it. So I looked up grapevines, pruned, not pruned, how to prune it. I spent an unnecessary amount of time researching grapevines. And I feel like I can grow grapes now. But I really wanted to be able to visualize what Jesus was talking about. And it's not like totally relevant in the end, but I'm sharing with you my research. So these are wild grapevines. Just keep going. You can see that the fruit is very sparse, it's crowded, you can just keep going. You can see how, you can't even see grapes here, like the grapes will get no light, right? It's just covered with grass and vines. Again, wild grapevines. And this is dead wild grapevines. Right? It's hard to see how anything can grow and thrive in a productive way in something like that, right? So now this is like a very carefully tended, pruned vineyard. Next. You can just keep going. Look, beautiful, luscious fruit. They get sunlight. It's orderly. Look at all the fruit hanging, right? Look at all that fruit, the space, so clean. Okay, stop. So Jesus says, I am the vine and you are the branches. So the whole trunk and then the vine that goes out the side is what Jesus is talking about when he says, I am the vine. And all the little ones are the branches. So when he talks about you are the branches, that's us there, okay? So we can stop there for now. So now that we've learned a bit about grapevines and what wild grapevines look like and what prune grapevines look like and who's the branch and who's the vine, I'll give you a bit of background on chapter 15. Jesus is talking to his disciples sometime shortly after the Last Supper and after Judas goes out to betray him, and sometime just before he's arrested, leading to his crucifixion. So there's a lot of urgency in his teaching now. He's not talking in parables anymore, where it's like, what do you mean? It's like, this is what it is. But he's still talking in metaphor. I don't know if it's because straightforward talk would still be difficult to understand. So I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Of all the 7 I am statements, this is the first time that he introduces God into the metaphor, where Jesus is the vine, and we're the branches, and God is tending that. He does the pruning and the tending and cultivating. Is it? Me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. Every branch he takes. Okay, every branch in me. So this is where I was like, oh, I don't know, this passage is kind of hard. It's kind of hard truth. I don't know if I want to teach from this. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. Every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I've spoken to you. So earlier in chapter 13, Jesus washes the disciples' feet before Passover, and he says that anyone who is bathed is already clean and only needs to wash their feet. And then he says, you are clean, but not all of you. Which is, I think if I were there and I was a disciple and we're all there and it's like, oh no, Jesus, wash my feet. And he's like, no, I have to. I'm going to wash your feet. And then he says, you are clean, but not all of you. He says things in a way where you kind of have to examine yourself like, am I clean? Am I not clean? Right? The disciples are clean, but in this context, he's specifically talking about Judas because he's not. He's already intending bad things in his heart, right? And by the end of that chapter, he's gone out to betray Jesus. So in that context, we go to chapter 15, and in the metaphor of the vine, when he repeats that the disciples are clean, Judas is already gone. So in that context, Jesus is talking, and he's saying the people that are like the disciples who are with him are attached to the vine. They are bearing good fruit. But there are also branches like Judas that are not really attached. They're nominally attached, but it causes harm to the vine. And it says that such branches the vine dresser takes away. So it's like, oh, God takes away branches. That's such a hard truth. But God did not remove Judas. Judas removed himself, and Judas took his own life. So branches that are not attached will fall and thus be taken away, right? So I was like, oh, that makes me feel better about the verse. But an interesting side note, as I was researching vines and grapevines and biblical history and things like that, is in Leviticus chapter 19, God gives farming advice to the Israelites because they're getting ready to go into the promised land. And he says, when you enter the land and plant any kind of fruit tree, regard its fruit as forbidden. Forbidden here means uncircumcised, which means not consecrated, not made holy, not yet clean. For 3 years you are to consider it forbidden. It must not be eaten. In the 4th year, all its fruit will be holy, an offering of praise to the Lord. And in the 5th year, you may eat its fruit. In this way, your harvest will be increased. I am the Lord your God. So, can I see the next image? So wild branches, next. Okay, that's like a pruned vineyard. And I learned, next slide, this is how long it takes for a brand new vine to grow and bear fruit. 3 years, 4 years. So when I was reading Leviticus, I was like, oh, that's why it takes 3 years. And then in the 4th year, when it bears a proper harvest, you give that first fruit to the Lord and then you can eat. And Jesus says in this verse, you are clean now. And he walked with them at this point for 3 years before he died on the cross. And so I was thinking, it's so neat how in him and in things that he says, there's connections to nature, and then God is teaching us about farming, and he's relating it to his time with the disciples. And it's almost like he's saying, it's been 3 years now that I've been walking with you, cultivating you, pruning you, and you're ready to bear fruit. And you can go out now. And he's saying, you're clean because it was considered clean in after the 3rd year, right? So I just thought that was an interesting, very interesting side note. That's just me. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. So people are created for attachment, and I strongly believe this. There's a lot of scientific research that shows that almost half, like 30 to 40% of infants who are not properly touched and given like physical affection die. There's a high mortality rate. And for the ones that do survive, they can develop attachment disorders and mood. They can't regulate their moods. They have extreme highs and lows in their mood swing. So it can be reversed with a lot of love and patience and hard work. But I think the fact is we are created to attach in a relationship. And when we don't have healthy relationships to attach to, we will attach to something else. We will attach to objects, status, lifestyle, addictions. But those kinds of attachments are not fulfilling. They can leave us hurting or lacking or both in the long run. And also, when we have attachment, when we can't attach properly, we have really highly developed defense mechanisms, like highly developed. I think we all have defense mechanisms, but this is like highly developed. So I'm attached to my husband, Teddy, my children, my family, but my life source attachment is to Jesus. So when he says he's the vine, it's the roots going into, it's where all the nutrients come from, and he supplies all that nutrient and life that allows me to bear fruit. But whatever it is that you attach to is where you will bear fruit. You will bear fruit. You will attach. We're created to attach, and that's where you bear fruit. So when we are attached to Christ, we will continually be pruned and cultivated towards yielding fruit that looks like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, Galatians, wisdom, purity, peace-loving, considerate, accommodating, full of mercy, good fruit, sincere, James 3. And there's verses and verses about humility, living justly, showing mercy, being bold, courageous, loving your neighbor, loving yourself, loving God, honesty, integrity. So these are the fruits that we would bear in our lives when we're attached to the life source of Jesus. So I don't think any of us do any of all of this perfectly, but that's why we're pruned in seasons, long term, like a lifetime. The fact that if I lack patience, it doesn't mean I'm disconnected from the vine and I'm going to be cut off and thrown in the fire. It just means I'm in the process of becoming. I'm growing. So it's like the nubs, right? Verse 5, I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. I wrestled with this verse too because on the one hand, I really can't do anything apart from Christ. There's so much supernatural to my everyday that I can't attribute to myself or a person. But on the other hand, I think I do a lot of things apart from Christ. I think that this is probably our communal experience every day, that we do a lot of things apart from Christ. So then what does this mean, that apart from Christ we can do nothing? I think that as people, we like to be capable. We value our ability to do many things. We value our independence, our personal rights, our freedom of choice, and we guard it more fiercely than we guard anything else, except maybe if you have children. And when we're not able to do so, we become very frustrated, irritable, angry people. Sometimes new parents are. We put our best efforts towards our personal freedom and comforts. Nations are built on this, right? So you do have choice, and you have the right to protect yourself and have healthy boundaries. I recommend that you do. You need to discern very carefully with God when it's safe to lay that down and when it's not. And you have a choice in that. But the question isn't whether we can do things apart from God or not. It's whether what we do has lasting value apart from God or not. If it has no lasting eternal value, then ultimately it's in vain, and ultimately it becomes nothing. And this is a hard thing to discern and grapple with, but do hard things, right? Verse 6, if anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. This passage is not a threat. It's not a threat to scare the disciples into staying into a relationship with him. It's not a, if you don't listen to my words, if you don't follow my commandments, then you're going to be cut off and thrown into the fire kind of message at all. It's not that for the disciples, and it's not that for us. This is an analogy to describe the nature of a relationship. So if I bring this down to an everyday level, Teddy and I are in a relationship. We're married. I don't think the vine and the branches analogy quite works for us, because who's the vine and who's the branch? But let's say our marriage, our commitment is the vine, and it's a good and a healthy one. And the branches coming out of our marriage would be like parents, other family members, children, friends, jobs, hobbies, dreams. So if you think of the wild grapevines, overcrowding and wild vines could cause a poor harvest. So if we have too many extracurriculars that are crowding our marriage and we no longer have meaningful time for each other, something has to be pruned off, right? A friend or acquaintance who's trying to get their flirt on with one of us would not be a branch that we want to keep. We would want to cut that off, right? If any of these branches is an addiction or like an abusive trait or something harmful, you want to cut that off, right? So the branches in our marriage that produce good fruit are necessary, and we want to keep those, cultivate those, prune those, keep that going, right? So Jesus is illustrating what a relationship is like with him, and when there are things that are harmful to it, they are pruned off. Right? That's necessary to the health and the growth of the relationship. So this passage is not a threat. He's talking about a relationship with us. It's an illustration of a healthy attachment to him. He's talking about a mutual indwelling. So he says, abide in me and I in you. He says, abide in me 11 times in this one paragraph. So if I take this down to an everyday example again with me and Teddy, how would I prune and cultivate a good relationship with Teddy? How would I abide in that? So I did some research on how to get closer to your partner. I did a lot of research. And so some of these are like pruning, some of this is fertilizing, some of this is cultivating, but it says ask personal questions, engage in self-disclosure, be honest about your feelings, don't shove things under the rug. Show up and be reliable. Share joys and sorrows. Share your memories. Try not to be judgmental. Show interest in their interests. This is very important. I used to show more, not so much anymore, interest in sports because he's very interested in it. I think I did okay. Forgive. Be responsive. Stay attuned. Be present and participate. Be present and participate. Learn each other's love languages. Withhold criticism. Own your statements. Be willing to receive feedback. Give yourself a timeout when necessary. Don't interrupt. Keep your tone in check. Ask. Express appreciation on a daily basis in creative ways. Not like, thank you, or wow, you're beautiful, but like creatively, like you've put thought into it. Remember to say, I love you, thank you, work out together. So in that list, I hear a lot of Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Songs, and Holy Spirit in that list. if I am a branch and I attach to Christ as my vine, my life source, that list would come naturally to me, or at least I'd be more open to it because that's what Christ is pruning me towards. So I think, okay, I feel like we don't do this in our close relationships, and we don't do this with God. I think we don't do this with God because he seems so far off. He's just kind of far away. And I don't know if we really do this in our love relationships today because it requires us to do work, a lot of work, and I don't know how much work we want to do. And two, it requires us to be vulnerable. And I don't know how vulnerable we're comfortable being, right? And so I don't know if we know how to do the work that it takes to move closer to God, to abide in him, to remain in him as he remains in us. And so just thinking that if I don't daily do this for Teddy. And I think that, so when I initially thought of this passage and I thought, oh, abide in me and I in you, I feel like there's like some kind of romantic thing there. And I read and I was like, nope, not romantic at all. Burning fire, branches being cut off, pruned, hard work, not romantic. But then I was thinking, romance, the definition of romance, our understanding of romance changes with time. To me, romance is not like fancy dinners in a beautiful place. For me, romance is like, I was dying and you were there for me. You are steadfast. Like, I can put my life in your hands. When we see elderly couples still holding hands, we think, oh, that's so romantic. But it took them hard work to stay in a place where they would still want to hold hands at 80 years old. It was hard work. So I think romance, when I think of my parents, is that they sacrificed so much for me. And I don't think we think that that's something romantic. But if it moves you to tears, if it moves you to love, that's romantic. And I think of Christ, and he doesn't woo us in flashy ways. He just says, I am for real. I am forever. And the things that come from me are good. It's like, stay close to me, abide in me. And for me, it's like, you know what? I find a lot of romance in that, a lot of comfort in that, much more than anything else that the world can offer me. So he says, so I think, the list is the list, but Jesus says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. So my words in you is a concrete example of how to abide in Christ. We let his words in us remain in us. We hold his words in our heart. We think about them. We think about it, we wrestle with it. I do this with God's words a lot, especially if it doesn't make sense or it sounds harsh. I'll think about it a lot. I think about Teddy's words a lot, my kids' words a lot. I think about my mom's words a lot because they're good and wise, and I hold them dear to my heart. And when I don't understand, I ask. I have a conversation about it. I talk things out with Christ when I don't understand. I talked this passage out with Christ this week. And in this mutual relationship, he says, ask. That was number 19 on the list. Ask, right? Whatever it is, it will be done for you, whatever it is. This is not what we want it to look like always or when we want it to happen, but it will be done for you. He says, ask. So he goes on to say, by this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. When we're living attached to him in this way and we begin to bear good fruit, it's a witness to the goodness of God because that's the fruit that we're bearing that people see, right? And you don't even need to talk about it. It's like Cassia shared when she walked into the mosque, the room felt it. The room felt that fruit bearing, right? It's not something, and he says, be humble. You don't have to walk around saying, I have good fruit. You walk in and it's just part of you everywhere. And in that, the goodness of God is spoken and he is glorified. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. And he keeps saying this, I love you so much. Stay in my love. I love you so much. And he says this to us all the time. I love you so much. I don't know how many times we say, God, I love you so much. I love you so much. And I want to abide in you. I want to be with you. You know? It's like, so much work. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. So keep my commandments is another tangible way that he gives us to abide in him. Commandments, it's not helpful to view these things as rigid laws and rules or something that's archaic and not relevant to our life today. He sums up his commandments in verse 12, which is love one another as I have loved you. Forever relevant in any context, right? And we're cultivated towards this. Thank you. We're cultivated towards this when we remain in him and he remains in us, right? And we don't have to do anything. We just attach and God does the work. All we have to do is just stay close and just say, yes, I love you. And I have a relationship with you, and I think about the things you say and hold it in my heart. And I have conversations with you, which is praying, right? I have conversations with you. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. When we're in right relationship with Christ and we are bearing good fruit, we benefit so much from that good fruit. We have so much deep joy and satisfaction in that. And our joy is the kind of joy that's so deep and full that you can't get from anything else that you try to attach to for satisfaction, right? And that's what June and Cassie, I think, were talking about when they said every time we talked about Jesus, his face would light up. And whenever we talked about not Jesus, his face would cloud over. That fullness of joy, and he did nothing but hear, right? This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. And that's what Christ did for us. No greater love than the kind where he would lay down his life for us. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. The first sentence I found a little bit interesting because in my mind, a friend would not command me or say, if you do this, then you're my friend. But this commandment is not like that, where, oh, if you don't do this, you're not my friend. It's his nature. Love one another as I have loved you is his nature. If we're not walking in that nature, when we walk in that nature, it's natural. And if that is bearing in us, then naturally we're friends with him. It's a sign that we're connected, attached, right? So it's not a conditional statement where if you do this, then you're my friend. It's like as a sign of our attachment, our friendship, this living out of the commandment will bear fruit, right? So you did not choose me, but I chose you, meaning he chose the disciples, right? So this is not something where it's like, oh, well, God chose me, but he didn't choose you. It's not that kind of verse. He's specifically talking to the disciples here where you didn't come seeking me. I called you out because I love you. I want to be in relationship with you. Stay in relationship with me. And there's so much urgency now because he knows that in just a few short moments, he'll be gone. He'll like physically be gone from them. And he knows there's so much urgency that they know, like, you need to stay in me. Even if I'm not physically with you, my words are with you. I've cultivated you, pruned you. 3 years you've had with me. I'm in you. I'm in you. Be in me, stay in me, right? He has so much urgency. And so constantly he's saying, move closer to me, stay close to me, remain in me, stay attached to me. There's good things in this attachment. And so move closer. Move closer because we're created to attach. We're created to attach, and you will attach to something. It's not a maybe you'll attach, you will attach. You will. So attach to Christ and work on that. Tell him, God, I love you. I want to talk to you today. I want to tell you about my day today. And then go through your memories with him, like, oh God, remember the time when you talk about that, you cultivate that relationship. You can exercise with him, right? Hannah, you can go on prayer walks with him, and there's like so much that's not out of the ordinary part of our day and our being. It's not so much out of what we do to move closer to him. It's like I could do it while I'm driving, I could do it while I'm doing the dishes, when I'm walking, when I'm like having a difficult conversation at work, anywhere, like I can abide in him. Previous work. So these things I command you so that you will love one another, which takes us to the next part of this series, right? Move closer to each other. He commands us to stay close to him so that we can love each other, right? It's not like, so that I can bask in the glory of your love. He's not saying that. He's like, stay close to me, love me, like, let me love you so that you can love one another, right?